Let's move on to the kChat interface, which looks like this. Like all instant messaging software, the navigation logic remains the same. On the left are the channels. We're going to have personal messages, and then we're going to have assistants, and we'll come back to that later. There are two types of channels. First, there's the general channel, which exists on all kChats. It's a default channel, and one that all new users will access when they first log on to kChat. The general channel actually groups together all kChat users in the organization. And here we can see that our colleague Marco has sent us a nice GIF asking if croissants are always delivered on Thursdays. With a nice GIF because it's possible to add GIFs directly. And in terms of presentation, you can see that as soon as I hover over a message with my cursor, I have reaction options. So typically, if I want to let him know that it made me smile, I'll put a little emoji with a little smile here. And as we can see above in terms of messages, this actually creates a much more fluid, much more natural communication with your collaborators. Where perhaps an email is a little cold and hard in the sense that each person receives it individually, here you can put in little animations and respond directly. Typically, if you click on the reply button, you'll receive a reply in French. You reply in the conversation thread, and this allows everyone on this channel, which is free, with free access, to see the conversation and react, and that really facilitates business communication. Typically, this is a message announcing an extra day off in this organization, and it's a message that's obviously taken with joy and pleasure by the team. You can see it here in the reactions, but if I want to react, thank you, or make a comment, I can do so directly here. When it comes to writing messages, it goes pretty far. So here I'm going to write a message. If I select it, I can choose to make the text bold, italic, strike through, to put in code. That's also possible. If I want to do messages one by one, I can also use bullet points, or I can also use numbering. It will actually format the message directly so that everyone can see it in a really clean way on their screen. Back to the management of communication channels. So there are two types of channel. There's what we'll call a free channel, which in this case is general, where any kChat user can access it. General, it's sometimes added by all users, and typically here we have a channel for urban planning, where people can come and go from the channel of their own free will. They can search for it here in the search bar here, and they can actually get to the channel without needing authorization. But as disseminating information on kChat,
can anyone create public and private channels?
No, it's only the people to whom you've given the rights, so you avoid a multiplication of channels. And now we're on the Create a New Channel menu. First of all, I'll need to give my new channel a name, which is the most important thing. This will create a direct access URL that you can edit. If you want to put a specific URL with a name or something secret, you can click on the Edit button. And this is really the most important choice to make because you have two choices. Public channel, where anyone can join and leave, and look for it in kChat, or private channel. Private channel, this will completely change the way the channel is presented, or rather hidden, in this case, from other users. It's just a private channel. It can't be searched. This means that if you have, I don't know, a directional channel, let's say, users who don't have access to this channel won't even see it offered if they search for it.
It's up to the administrator.
Exactly. Here we'll create a private channel. Importantly, you can enter a description. You can enter a description for each language. So with one manipulation, you put 2.fr, 2.en, 2.de. Is it possible to add a link to an internal Wikipedia? Absolutely. Then there are two things. There's the channel description, and there's the header. There, you can see, you can add a channel header, or there, you can put some important information. Again, the italic Grail formatting is also applicable here, but you can typically put a URL. We use kChat within Infomaniak, and the really important information, the most useful links, we put in the channel header. That way, employees don't have to search for the information every time or bookmark it. In a quite natural way, they arrive on the channel and simply click on the URL.
In large organizations, this also enables you to set up communication policies that are perhaps differentiated according to certain teams or certain channels.
After that, The channel will be managed in terms of members by the people you've empowered. So the people you've empowered will be appointed channel admins. Having created it, I'm directly the channel admin. Next, I'll be able to add users. So here I'll be able to select, let's say, my colleague, Peter Tack. I'll select him and that'll add him. And basically, he'll be named a member. As a member, he'll be able to consult, react and write in the channel, but he won't be able to add other people. This right, if you so decide, can only be reserved for channel administrators. If, on the other hand, one day I want to give Peter the right to manage the channel and add people, I can do so by clicking on the Manage button.
And is it possible, once you've created a private channel, for one reason or another want to make it public, is it possible to change it afterwards?
Well, it's perfectly possible in the settings. You can, in fact, change a private channel into a public one. However, the opposite is not yet possible. We're working on this feature, but it is possible. I'd like to come back to adding users, because on this modal, you can see an external user being added. And this is where you'll be able to add people who have no connection with your kC suite. In other words, if you want to add someone, I don't know, your wooden pallet supplier, you can enter his email address, he'll receive an invitation, he'll be able to connect, but only on the channel here named Tess, but which could have another name, and only to the resources you're going to give him. In other words, he'll have a kChat interface, devoid of all his communication channels, devoid of all personal messages, and he'll really only have access to this individual space made just for him, and this avoids any data leakage or him coming across anything else. And just as with conventional users, if the communication channels to which he has access, or the channel, he won't see the others, even if they're open.
So a great point for security, because professional exchanges take place on your platform.
After kChat, once you've set up the teams, once everyone has access to the necessary resources, once you've been able to organize everything, we'll come back to general, and we can see that you can communicate in two different ways on a public channel. You can either post a message, hello, either I can put within a robust, I can tag a specific person. The advantage of tagging a specific person is that there are two types of notifications on kChat. There are what we'll call urgent notifications, i.e. someone who has quoted you directly on a public channel. So they're either quoting you to give information to the rest of the team, or they need information. And the way the notification looks, and even the ringtone looks, is different. If, say, someone tags me on a thread, or even writes to me live, I'll get a ringtone. And the way the thread is displayed will be different. The fact that I have been quoted will be highlighted, and I'll probably be needed for information. However, as long as it's just messages being added to channels, it's not a notification with a ringtone, because otherwise, depending on the size of your kChat, it could become a cacophony very, very quickly. The channel will actually turn bold to show you that you have unread messages. So let's say I tag my colleague Peter. He'll actually see the notification directly on his kChat. Just click on the notification. As my colleague Marco has just done, I'll actually see a number 1 displayed on the right. However, if it's just a message on a channel, then it'll just be displayed in bold. This allows you to really see where there's information that requires your input, or you're actually asked, or you're quoted at a glance.
This is a demo account, so it's relatively quiet. In the heat of the action, with people who are in contact with a lot of people, I'm thinking in particular of project managers who coordinate a lot of people. How do you keep track of things and make sure you don't miss any messages?
So already, when you're going to write messages on kChat, and this is the importance of having teams that are well configured, instead of having to quote several people. Let's take the HR department as an example. In my chat, I have an HR chat that was created automatically, which in fact takes up the logic and number of people I added to my team at the very beginning of the presentation, which is called HR. And now if I click on it, it will ping the 2 people who are part of this channel. So automatically, and this is why we were talking about the importance of configuring this, is that the better you configure your teams from the outset, the easier it's going to be. Where typically with an email address, you have to remember each time who belongs to which department. Here, a simple hat, we've got HR, we've got accounting. You can notify them and they'll receive the notification directly.
It's great because if you're in Department A but you need a resource from another department that's not here, you can still call on them. Exactly.
And that's irrespective of whether people are on vacation or not. since it's going to ping the whole department. Anyone who's free will be notified. And in terms of message management, there's one feature that's really important, and that's what really gets us away from the classic email as we know it. This is message priority. This is really extremely important, because a message sent in the conventional way will have a standard priority. But when you write, whether to a person or in a channel, you can give a different priority. You can put important or urgent. The difference is that important. People will get this notification at the very top. It's actually going to be out of sync with the classic chronology to say, wait, here, maybe, I don't know, at 10 o'clock this morning, there's an important message that's been sent. I'm showing it to you as a priority so you can deal with it as a priority. Then there's the rest. And the urgent mode is extremely interesting to use, obviously, with parsimony, because the urgent mode can bypass the do not disturb mode. People who perhaps, I don't know, would be on pause can still send the notification.
That's an interesting point. It also points out that it's possible to switch the application to do not disturb mode, so you don't always have incessant notifications. Everything to...
And in these message priorities, you have a feature that has, in fact, completely changed our workflow, where in the past we had to send emails confirming afterwards with everyone. Did you read the email? Did you take note? Always a bit of a race, especially when you start having several dozen, even hundreds of people in the loop. Here you can ask for an acknowledgement of receipt, i.e., when the person receives the message, they'll have to validate with a view the fact that they've seen this message, and you'll have the timestamp of when the person saw it and confirmed, in fact, that they've read it. And confirmed, in fact, having read the message. In other words, there was a time when you should have, let's say, I don't know, an end-of-year party, sent an email to 50 people, checked with the 50 people to see if it was okay, and asked for replies. Here, in fact, with the acknowledgement request, in a single hover, you go to the message you sent. You see, okay, there are, I don't know, 4 people, in this case on the general. They've all accepted the message, they've all read the message, and they've confirmed that they've read it. It really facilitates communication within the company.
Done. And does it also work for people on the move who aren't necessarily in front of the computer?
That's a very good question. I'll move straight on to status management. An extremely important element of kChat is the status of each of your collaborators. First of all, each collaborator can be assigned an icon. Some companies, including ours, actually use this icon system to indicate whether I'm teleworking or working in the building. After that, you can add a status, a message. If, for example, you're leaving for a meeting, you can program the deletion of this status. If, let's say, you go on break and you know that in an hour or in 30 minutes you're off for lunch, you know that in 30 minutes you'll be back, then, if I set the status, it will change automatically, and in 30 minutes it will be removed. And any employee who tries to contact you, when they go to your profile, they'll see that you're away for lunch until 2 o'clock, 05, and at 2 o'clock 05, without any action on my part, the system will in fact reset itself to the initial status. So now I'm going to go back to my serious business status tag. That's the status.
In the end, it can also be used for companies with several sites to show people which site they're on one day. Exactly. And then another extremely important element is whether you're online, away, or in do not disturb mode, or even online altogether, because that's going to change the way people see you. In other words, unless it's an urgent message, as we've seen before, your Mac, PC or phone won't bother you with notifications during that time. There are predefined time frames, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, or even tomorrow. It's important to know that kChat is able to understand whether you're active in front of your machine. And if, after 15 minutes, there's no action, it will automatically switch you to absent mode. And from the moment you're in absent mode, or we see that there's no activity on the machine, then automatically the system will send its notifications to your cell phone or any device you've connected to mobile. The point is, we really want this to simplify the use of direct messaging in the workplace. You could imagine today that I simply close my laptop, leave, it's the end of the day. It automatically puts me in do not disturb mode, I don't have to do a thing, and in fact, in a totally fluid way, the next notifications that come in will arrive on my phone. And you should know that the kChat app, at least on iOS, because this feature doesn't just exist on Android, manages the notification summary. In other words, if you receive several notifications in a given period of time, or if you were in do not disturb mode, then the notifications in important and urgent mode will be displayed first. This may save you a lot of scrolling if you receive a lot of messages,
I'll go back to online mode.
Online.
So all this, in fact, should enable you to let the rest of your team know where you are, if you're online, if you're available or not. And why are these features so important? Because in terms of ecosystem integration, we've integrated several Infomaniak tools, such as kMeet. Here again, I'll use the example of email, which I'm still working on. But where in the old days, you'd have to send an invitation with a link, it now takes long minutes for everyone to find it. If, let's say you want to invite everyone to a video conference, you click on this button and it sends a unique connection URL. Everyone gets the notification asking them to connect to the corresponding kMeet. No need to connect to another tool. Everything is, in fact, centralized on the kC suite.
And when someone calls us, is it something discreet? Are you interrupted from your work?
I'll accept the call. I'll accept the call. So here we are on the Meet directly. And concretely, it allows people who are invited to the Meet, I'll close it. It allows people who are invited to the Meet to access it simply by clicking either on the join button or on the ringtone directly. You should know that the ringtone, of course, only activates if you have Do Not Disturb mode deactivated. Because if you're in Do Not Disturb mode, you'll see a notification telling you that a call has been requested, but you won't hear the ringing tone.
What was interesting to see was that the person hears that there's a call with music, and that really makes it very easy to organize meetings within a channel too. Exactly. It's not a discrete meeting that nobody sees.
And then, in terms of presentation, so we've talked about channels, but then there's also the notion of personal messages. It's important to remember that the personal messages you exchange with someone are totally private. Only you and the person you're chatting with can see that message. Let's say, for example, two colleagues, I'll take that example, I can create a group of common personalized messages which will be accessible only to these people and which will not appear to anyone else in the organization.
If I take the personal logic to its logical conclusion, this means that the company's chat administrator has no access to this content.
Indeed, as far as private messages are concerned, the administrator cannot enter or see the history of these private messages. Only messages in channels are accessible to the administrator. Later on in the presentation, we'll see that the administrator has statistical tools that enable him to manage in much greater detail the way Catch has been used by his company. So here we can see that I have a conversation group to which I can define a header. I don't know, let's call it Team RH. Again, in terms of formatting, I can put a Greek, italic, strike-through, pre-formatted code, or even a quote. Then I can pin, or rather manage the channel's pinned messages.
No.
So if, let's say, I put a message like hello, I can pin that message, pin it to the channel. This way, if you have important information with people you talk to a lot, which means you have quite a history, or where in the old days you would have had to scroll or search afterwards, here you can search in the navigation bar. You can already put important messages. You can pin them directly to it.
Are the messages you pin only visible to you or to all channel members?
So there are two notions. Saving is for me, but pinning is for everyone in the channel.
It's very useful for highlighting key information for a department, a team, or a project, exactly.
So, when it comes to personal messages, group creation, you really do have extremely flexible management. You come along, you click on the plus button, you can either open a personal message with one or more people, create a public or private channel, or browse the channels, which will be either the channels you have access to and which are private, or all the public channels of
chat channels. Here I see that you can create categories.
kChat. So to create a category, first of all, to manage the influx of messages on kChat, again, it all depends on the size of your organization. You'll have several modes. Typically, the mode I use is that I'll create categories, I'll stop with the TimRH, I'll call it accounting, I press create, and it'll actually create a section, accounting, in which I can simply drag and drop a person or a group or even a channel into it, and this allows you to organize your interface. If you know that there are people with whom you don't chat often, you can actually reduce the number of messages here. It'll take them out. Here I'm on discussion, so it'll show them to me. But if I'm on general, it'll take them out. But if someone sends me a message, the word accounting will be in bold to show me the fact that I have unread messages. And if someone quotes me in one of the channels in the accounting category, I'll have a countdown with a number 1, number 2 next to it. So this really lets you personalize how you manage your interactions with people. Typically, if you have people, I don't know, your direct colleague with whom you talk a lot, or it's always very high priority, you can move it and put it where you want. Maybe you can create a priority category. You know that whatever happens, the important thing to know is that categories are reflected on all your devices. So here's the interface. We have the arrangement logic. So here's the fact that I've put the wizards and Compter here. When I connect to my mobile device, they'll all be in the same place. So if you know that the people at the top are the most important in terms of organization in your company, you know that you never have to scroll to find the messages.
Plus, I think you can bookmark them unless I'm mistaken.
Absolutely. Then you can bookmark them, because when it comes to notification, you can go further than the basic settings. You can mute a channel or a person. I'll take an example of a channel where it's a department in your company, where there are a lot of people, they talk a lot. It's not really your business, and you'd rather not have the notifications because you know there's not much important going on there for you anyway. So you can mute the channel. Muting the channel will hide the fact that new messages have been written. However, if you are quoted on the muted channel, you are still notified. So that if you're asked for information, you can get it. If you're asked for something, you can get the information you're asked for from kChat.
It's really very useful for people who get a lot of requests. By the way, I think it's interesting that you should tell us about the thread for people who are mentioned all over the place. I'm thinking in particular of management positions such as CEOs and project managers. These are people who are in great demand. How can they be guaranteed not to miss a thing?
In the application's parameters, you can manage the way it displays its messages or the unread channels. Messages or unread channels in a much more refined way. Here it's configured for a person with, let's say, classic usage, or a few times a day he'll be notified, or he'll have a certain number of messages, but nothing too imposing either. On the other hand, you can group unread channels separately. So where this changes the app's behavior is that here I have my channels. And it doesn't matter. I'm the one who decided the order. And this order will remain fixed. And it's the channels that will be highlighted, or with a number if I'm specifically mentioned in them, or my team. It will be displayed here. On the other hand, if I choose to group unread channels separately, it will detach those channels and put them just below my thread. So that if, let's say there are 15 channels to read, instead of having to select them by hand and sort out what's been read and what hasn't, the application puts them right there for me. Once I've read the information and switched to another channel, it's back where it belongs in the interface. And it's right back where I left it. Whether it's personal messages or channels, you can organize them in two ways. You can organize them alphabetically, you can organize them by recent activity, you can organize them manually. So typically, if I put by recent activity, you'll see that generally, since it's the last channel on which there was activity, it comes right at the top. If someone writes about urban planning, then they'll go right to the top. Just as if in my personal messages, I prefer to sort people. Or let's say in accounting, I prefer to sort people manually. I put it manually. And then, no matter who talks to me first, the order will remain the same. When it comes to configuring the application, you can really go quite far. As I said earlier, the basic configuration is designed to be easy to use for users of all backgrounds. However, if you're a power user, you can go even further. First of all, as far as the theme is concerned, you can choose either a light or dark theme, or a mixture of the two, or a theme that adapts to the settings of your browser and operating system. In terms of view, if you need to manage a lot of messages, you can switch to compact mode. This will increase the density of information. If you suddenly want to stop displaying previews of links on websites, you need to know that if you put a link to a site, you'll be shown the thumbnail. Like any software that points to a URL, you'll be shown a small presentation. You can disable this. You can also deactivate all emoji to have a more direct interface. Then there are the privacy settings. In other words, you can share the time of your last activity. Now, If I activate this mode of sharing the time of the last activity, if I leave and no longer have any activity on kChat, then, as we discussed before, it will put me in absent mode and it will inform the person who sees my profile that I was last active at the time of the last activity.
That's not bad because it lets people know that you're no longer at work, that you've gone into your evening.
Last activity. Exactly. And here you can also see that the compact display changes the way people are displayed in the channels and no longer shows the profile photo. I'll switch back to standard, compact profile picture. You just see the person's status. That's really up to the individual. He can set it. When it comes to notifications, you can also decide when to trigger a push notification. So away or online, you can even disable this, send mobile push notifications. You can choose what type of notification you want, because if you have a lot of messages going through kChat, maybe you only want notifications from people who have quoted you directly or who are talking to you privately. You can set this up, and this setting replicates directly on your device. Desktop notification, the way you want it displayed, the type of ringtone, whether you want a ringtone or not. Very importantly, you can activate email summaries. In other words, let's say you go on vacation or on Friday, I don't know, you've taken Friday off, long weekend. On Monday, when you come back, when you log back in, you'll actually get a summary email showing you the most important messages you've received. So, the personal messages. Then there are the messages in the various channels that have generated discussion. So this is an email that's sent. You can define the frequency at which it is sent, either once a week or once a day, depending on what you want. If you are typically on vacation for several days, several weeks, it might be useful to have a summary sent to you by email once a day of what's been said, perhaps the information you've been asked for, or the private messages you've been sent. So that's the kChat web interface. It's also important to remember that kChat is really designed to simplify your life. We used to talk about how it simplifies direct business communication. No need to send emails to 50 or hundreds of people. But when it comes to day-to-day use, kChat becomes your partner in simplifying your professional life.
And it also lets you share documents directly, whether it's videos or MP3 files. Here we typically shared an audio file just before, and the advantage is, as we said before, you're really going to find all the exchanges here, the working documents, and even 2 years later you'll be able to find what was said at a given moment. It's really extremely valuable. And it also brings transparency to a company because everyone has the same information and things are really structured in the right place with the right people.
And then, in terms of simplifying day-to-day operations, given the number of messages that sometimes pass through in a single day, it's a bit difficult to keep track. And we often say to ourselves, I've got to remember this and that, I've got to remember that. I need to remember to reply to this person. And there's an extremely useful function where you may have read a message, but you say to yourself, I can't reply now, I'll have to reply tomorrow. You have a reminder function. If you click on reminder, the application will send you a notification saying, voila, you've asked me to remind you that such and such a message is awaiting a reply from you. And when it comes to reminders, you can define 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, tomorrow Monday, or personalized. At that point, the application will tell you that you've asked me to remind you to reply to or read this message. So you can just say, okay, I'll take care of it tomorrow, click on it. Tomorrow, when you log in, it'll give you a summary of all the messages you've asked to be reminded of. Or it'll give you a summary of all the messages you've missed since you last logged in.
In the same way, I think it's important to show that you can schedule messages to be sent. This is very useful at weekends when you have an idea and don't want to send a notification to someone who's resting. You can choose when the message will actually be sent.
So when I send the message, I have a menu button to schedule a message, and it will suggest tomorrow at 9 o'clock or another day with a personalized schedule. This information is stored on the server side, so if you schedule a message for tomorrow and you're on vacation, whether your computer or chat instance is open or not, the message will go. So it really allows you to say, typically, you'll see me in the evening, you'll say to yourself tomorrow, I absolutely must remember to tell the team such and such information. You can already write it down and plan it for the next morning. When it comes to simplifying business communications, one of kChat's most important features is its integrated translation function. In the case of Infomaniak, we now have colleagues in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, which means that at one time, when we didn't yet have kChat, we had to translate messages, and with certain translation solutions we're all familiar with, certain terms would disappear, or other, perhaps less suitable, terms would appear in the message. With kChat, we've taken care of that, meaning that if you have a company or organization that communicates in several languages, you can click on the Translate button, and we'll translate a message that's in English, in French, in the language of your profile, or if you've typically written a message in French, you can also translate it on the fly, so that it appears directly in the right language for your collaborators.
And this translation is carried out on the server side by Infomaniak, so the ownership and confidentiality of your data is guaranteed. Incidentally, I think this is an excellent opportunity to talk about the AIs that are integrated into kChat. And I'd like to digress briefly to say that AI is something that Infomaniak is currently working on. As of today, we've officially announced that people who own kChat will progressively benefit from a sovereign AI that is integrated into the mail service and enables automatic drafting of emails, automatic replies to emails, rewording and correction of spelling mistakes. And the special thing is that we offer an AI that is 100% sovereign. This means that everything is handled by Infomaniak from end to end. The confidentiality of your data is maximized.
And so that you can test the power of this sovereign AI, we're also making ChatGPT available free of charge, so you can compare the results you get between the two AIs.
So here, in terms of access for AIs, they're represented as if you were chatting with a specific person, so they'll appear on your left-hand panel. I've already sorted them into a category I've called assistants, as I don't need them all the time, so I've put them there. And here we can see that kChatbot, before the webinar, I asked him to write me a text inviting our team of 50 people to an end-of-year party. The party will take place at the Salle Communale in Geneva on December 2 at 2 p.m. Participants must confirm their attendance by Friday evening. Who has written us a text that's really quite good, adding that this year has been rich in challenges and successes for our team, and we'd like to celebrate our achievements and highlights together. So really, as perhaps a team leader or even just one person in the team who needs to communicate. Instead of having to write this whole message, I asked the kChat AI to write it, and if I take this message, I can copy it, go to General, and there I'll do an add here. Add here will ping all the people who are in the channel, notified, and there I can simply copy and paste the message. And voila, in a few seconds I asked kChat's AI to write me a message with important information. Announce that an event is going to take place at such and such a place, at such and such a time, on such and such a day. People have to show up, and even better, I could have thought. But I'm thinking about it now. You can put the request for acknowledgement of receipt like this. Your message inviting you to an event or important message that you asked kChat to write. You can then ask your collaborators to acknowledge its receipt, which means that when it comes to planning, you don't have to run after anyone. Everything is directly and transparently on this interface.
Can you explain how easy it is to find a channel, how to access ChatGPT assistants, kChatbot, which is the sovereign AI, kChatbot, how to find them?
So when it comes to searching on kChat, you'll have two search bars you can manage and search for people and communication channels here, top left. Here you can see your latest activities, the channels in which you've participated, and here you can see, since I've used them, that I've got kChatbot and ChatGPT in there. They're marked with a bot, but if I simply type bot, you can see that I've found kChatbot or GPT, ChatGPT here. The advantage of this search menu is that you can search for the channels of communication you have with several people, but instead of having to type the full name, you can type a few letters. Here I typed MARPAU to directly find the channel of conversation of Marco and Pauline. In fact, by making the space, it directly understands that you are looking for two people. The advantage of this solution is that if you have a lot of communication with a lot of people, instead of having to type by hand, so there was Marco, Pauline, Peter, Adrian, Thomas, you simply enter the first few letters and it will search for you directly.
And to access this search very quickly, you can also use a keyboard shortcut. If ever keyboard shortcuts were listed in the NUT parameters, they're all here. and this is one I personally use every day. On the Mac it's Command K, and on the PC it's Control K, and it brings up this search field directly.
Importantly, if you're using the web version, kChat will detect the OS you're using and adapt the keyboard shortcuts directly. So let's say I'm on a Macintosh, it displays the Macintosh shortcuts. If I were on Windows, it would replace them all with Windows shortcuts. Then you have a second way of searching, a second search bar that appears here at the top. And here's the first question. What are we looking for? A message or a file? If you're looking for a message, you have plenty of customization options, i.e., you can enter a from, the person you're looking for the message from, an in, you're looking for the message. Let's say I'm looking for Thomas's message. In general, on a specific date, or if you don't know the date, you can enter before a date or after a specific date, and you can exclude search terms or include search terms. If I'm looking for a message from, I don't know, a colleague who's talking to me about croissant, let's say I can put, I'm looking for a message from such and such a person in such and such a channel, which includes the word croissant. And in his search, he'll only show me that.
The great thing about a tool like this is that its memory is limitless, and it really lets you remember who made a decision, why it was done, even for someone who's just joined a new team. It also lets you see where a project stands. The great strength of a tool like this is that within a team, everyone has access to the same information, and you can go back in time.
And if you're looking for a file, you can see that we have a lot of similar things. So you can look for an from file, someone's file, but then you can go further. If you're looking for a PPTX or PowerPoint extension, you can say, I'm looking for the PowerPoint file of my colleague Thomas, who must have sent this before the 1st of November of 2023. So in terms of search, it's really extremely powerful. If you have the right information, you can type it in directly here. You can set several parameters, which means that even in the case of a chat like Infomaniac's, there are thousands and thousands of messages passing through every day. With a similar search bar, you can directly find information no matter how many messages there are on kChat.
It's a very simple tool to use, and it's well worth taking the time to get to grips with it and customize it to your own preferences. There's a lot more to say, such as the fact that you can find all your saved messages in one place and the threads that display a summary. Well, we don't have any. But if you're ever notified and you're worried about missing something, the thread will really give you a summary of everything you've got to deal with during the day. It's really handy when you're in a meeting, can't reply to people, and then want to go back in time without having to think, did I miss something in a chat or not? Really, there's a lot more to come. Now, I think what's interesting to see is what kChat's places in the breakout suite and what kind of interaction we have. For example, can we get notifications from the calendar in kChat? Can we link kChat with a support system to be notified in a chat when there are new tickets or things like that?
So kChat, you can add what we call webbooks, which means that any service that uses webbooks, you can integrate into kChat. So if you're using even services that weren't designed to work with kChat, typically at Infomaniac we use services for certain products or for certain things. I'll take the example of support. And when there's a change of status on a ticket or on an issue that's been opened, then kChat, thanks to the webbook, will be able to notify the corresponding people. In terms of power, it really goes a long way, and you can configure it according to the tools you use, which may or may not be compatible with kChat.
And on the application side, do I have to install an application? Do external users have to install applications on their phone, on their device? How does it work?
So that's kSuite's great strength. And this logic has inevitably been reflected in kChat, the demo we've just shown you, with all the features we've demonstrated, including Assistant, Bot, Notification, and kMeet, when you called me. Here we are on the web version. We're going to tell you, please install the local application to have access to all these features. We offer a dedicated version for Mac, Windows Linux, iOS, and Android, so we cover all OSs. But if, for the sake of simplicity, you want to use the web version, you'll have to install the local application.
Are there any displays? Exactly. Are there any workstations on which you're not used to being?
Exactly. And this is another point we wanted to address with this, is that today we have more and more organizations that might want to keep their machine longer. We're seeing certain competitors saying, no, you need the latest OS version to use it, so they're running or using web versions that are truncated in terms of functionality. So whether it's a machine running Windows or a machine running Windows, Same thing for Macs. As long as it's an up-to-date browser, it doesn't matter whether it's Firefox, Chrome, Safari. As long as the browser is up to date, all the functionalities are there and everyone is able to use it. This means that if you have a fleet of company machines where users don't have admin access to install the app, they can still access kChat. Today the web is evolving, and the way we used to manage information, or rather the rigidity with which we had to send emails, which required us to manage information afterwards, either on a notepad or elsewhere, has evolved thanks to assistants, because they're more than just tools, they're really assistants for everyday life. You've got a tool that lets you communicate instantly with your team or with people outside your team so they can react. In fact, it'll centralize all the information. You, as a manager perhaps, have a hub where all the information is in one place. And it's destined to supplant email for internal corporate communication. You can launch a kMeet, you can do a lot of things that would have required an email in the past with much more delay. Today, if I create a Meet, it's usually a matter of a few seconds before all my colleagues arrive, whereas an email is obviously not the case. In terms of pricing and offers, there are 3 packages for kSuite. We have kSuite Standard, where the first user is free for life. We have kSuite Pro, where there are advantages that will change. And then we have kSuite Enterprise, kSuite Standard, first user free for life. You have 2 email addresses per user, so you can have a personal email address, a possibly pro email address, 15 gigas of storage per user. And in terms of tools, you have all the tools we talked about before. Email, Drive, the Office suite in the Drive, Calendar and kChat as well.
It's also important to specify that storage space per user is global. This means that if you have 2 users, you'll have 30 gigabytes, and these 30 gigabytes can be used by user number 1 as well as user number 2. And the main thing that's different about these offers is that the corporate suite allows you to fully customize your ecosystem, logo, colors, and above all, your URL. This means that in our imaginary company, Swiss Architecture, people would log on to cadrive.swissarchitecture.com or kChat.swissarchitecture.com.
The advantage of having these means of connection is that, as we all know, when you have several dozen or even hundreds of people to manage in terms of IT, as an administrator you'll always have questions that are sometimes a little basic, and it's always difficult to adapt to everyone's level. But if, as an administrator, instead of giving a rather obscure URL pointing to a resource, you could use an email program, video conferencing software, the advantage with custom brand and kSuite is that the people who will have access to the emails will go to mail.yourdomain-name. And by simply typing in the email, they will arrive on the login page or on the product to which they are already connected. Same thing with kChat, which means that the people in your organization don't even have to remember who the service provider is, because as we see every day, confusion arises. I need such and such an account for video. I need such and such an account for email. I need such and such an account for the Drive, etc. The advantage of the kSuite is that you get all these tools in one place, under a single login. The people you manage don't have to have 50 logins. It's a single login that lets you connect to an entire ecosystem, all simplified on a sovereign cloud in Switzerland.